After a much needed break, the Kirby on Sports podcast is back in business. Welcome. Once again, I am your gracious host, Josh Kirby. As always, we would love to thank our sponsors of the Kirby on Sports podcast, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate, Barrett Pest and Termite Services, Shenandoah Music, and Mark Lynch with Guild Mortgage. Also, don't forget the official energy drink of the Kirby on Sports podcast is Don't Sleep Energy. Check out their store on Amazon at amazon.com/stores/don't sleep. Use promo code Kirby123 for 10% off your order every single time. America's pastime is right around the corner, and we have some guests for you. Coming up, my interview with Baseball America's Savannah McCann as we discuss the youth of baseball, especially for the Washington Nationals, coming up next. And later on, this interview was so great, we are going to play it again. My interview, Dan and myself interviewing MASN Roch, the School of Roch, who covers the Orioles on MASN. It's going to be a very fun episode, ladies and gentlemen. It all comes your way next. The Kirby on Sports podcast. For sports fans living in condominium and homeowners associations, as well as business professionals, when you need a reserve study, PM Plus Reserves has been in business since 1990. Their studies are accurate and easy to understand. Check them out when your association needs a study. www.pmplusreserves.com. You can also contact them at 703-803-8436. Once again, www.pmplusreserves.com. All right, back with you on the Kirby on Sports podcast, Dan Dembski, Josh Kirby. We are now joined by a very special individual. If you travel up to Baltimore Orioles games, chances are you will see the School of Roch in the press box because he writes his story almost every day. School of Roch, what's going on, buddy?
Every day.
What's up, guys? Yes, every day since August 1st, 2008. Apparently, I've got a reader, Rusty, who's kept track of the actual days of the streak. We're over 5,000. Yeah, it's a sickness, and it's got to end soon.
every single day. I know Dan's gonna talk to you more about that, but Roch, thank you so much for hopping on for a little bit of time. MASN covering the Orioles. You can find him on Twitter at MASN Roch. Before we get into the Orioles talk, Roch, I ask pretty much any one of my guests this question. How'd you get started in the world of sports?
Yeah, I've been asked many times, like, can you speak at our journalism class? I'm like, everything I did was wrong. So for me to speak, I'd be like, hey, don't do this. I'll try and make this a short story, but I majored in journalism at the University of Maryland for like one semester and switched to radio, TV, film, RTVF. But I took a bunch of writing classes. So I graduated. I didn't write for the Diamondback, the school paper. And I didn't have any clips other than my high school ones at Old Mill, which nobody wants to see those. I had no clue what I was going to do when I got out. I interviewed at like a radio station a TV station. They were like, oh, you probably should be in a newspaper because you write. I took all these writing courses, but I didn't have the clips. And then it just became a series of lucky breaks where a girlfriend, her neighbor across the street used to get the penny saver. I don't even know if you guys know what the penny saver is.
Yeah.
And they were advertising. The owners were starting a free weekly in the greater Savannah Park, Arnold area. They were looking for a sports writer. So I would have known that if she didn't tell me. I didn't even read the penny saver. I applied, and the girl who was on the news side, it was like one person I went to high school with. We were friends. She was my editor of the school paper my junior year, her senior year. And she's like, oh, he's funny. He's hilarious. Go ahead and hire him. And the woman who was in charge from Savannah Park was like really involved in the Savannah Park community. And she knew my dad. He was a principal at Savannah Park Middle School and had a real crush on him. Said, oh, I used to love going to his office. So she already knew the name. That's how I got in. So I'm there for a year. The paper folds. I'm covering preps. There's like 16 schools in Anne Arundel County, plus Anne Arundel community, private schools there. And they fold after a year. And a girl I had been dating, who I ended up marrying, we had a daughter, divorced later, all that information. But she went to the Sun and said, hey, they have an opening for a sports clerk in the Anne Arundel County Bureau. I wouldn't have known that. I applied. The editor goes, really? You are an editor at your paper. You want to come here and be a clerk? I'm like, dude, I'm out of a job. And I was an editor because I was the only one in the department. Let's go on a resume. So I got the job, and I really had to pay my dues. Like, I eventually became a reporter, covered high schools in the county, ended up covering small colleges, and just worked my way to getting on the Oriole beat. And that only happened, I helped out, 95 Ripken streak ending, or just streak breaking the record. I mean, not 21-30, 21-31. Covered the playoffs in 96, the Jeffrey Mayer game at Yankee Stadium, just helping out. And in the spring of 97, the two Oriole writers put in their 2 weeks notice. Buster Olney went to the New York Times to cover the Yankees. Jason Lacunfora went to Detroit to cover the Red Wings, the big hockey guy. And I got called in the editor's office, hey, can you go down to Lauderdale and cover the Orioles? And they hired Joe Strauss, the late, great Joe Strauss from Atlanta, to be the lead guy. I was the backup. I met him during the workout at Camden Yards before opening day. But that happened because two guys left. So it was a series of breaks that I would never go to a class and say, look, here's what you do. Don't get an internship, because I didn't. Hope a girlfriend's neighbor sees a job opening. Hope you have connections, etc. Date a girl who will get you a job somewhere else. It just all happened. And then luckily, I guess fortunately, I was considered good enough at the job to advance. But man, it took a lot of breaks to make that happen. That was my short answer. Would you like the longer answer?
That's perfect. That's perfect. So it sounds like connections have always been important. I'll write that down. That's good. That's good to know. But talent definitely comes into it as well. Now, when you got to MASN in 2008, did you set a goal for yourself to write a blog every day? Or what was the process like at the beginning to get you on the road to where you are now? 15 years later, well, not quite 15 years because it's, we're 7 months away, but 14 and a half years later, to get where you are today. Did you know that you would be writing a blog every day, or did it just kind of pour out of you in that respect?
It just happened. And part of the motivation was the competition, because I was at the Sun. This is another break. The Sun was offering one of its series of buyouts. And I had no intention at that point of really thinking I was going to take it, but a lot of good people had left. I mean, two guys were fired while we were in the press box at an Oriole game. They got a phone call, and it was David Steele, Rick Mace got the call, like, hey, can you come up to 501 North Calvert Street? It's like, seriously? That, like, this was happening. So I had sat down before a road trip to Boston with somebody at MASN, met up with them and just said, hey, I'm just checking to see if you have any openings. I'm just kind of seeing, just in case I need to find something else. And they said they really didn't at the time. And I said, well, by the time I get back from my road trip, that buyout deadline is going to pass, but just keep me in mind. And I just happened to be helping with the post-game show at the radio station after a game. So I was, Steve Molesky and I was like going on midnight. My phone is blowing up from the guy I sat down with that day. So during a commercial break, I took the call, and he said, hey, I just happened to be in DC. I may have been John Angelos that was there. And I just mentioned our talk, and he said, hey, get a deal done tonight. So basically, I had to make the decision on the spot, like, we need to know right now. I'm like, I've been at the Sun over 20 years. How do you make that decision? Right. And then they told me the salary, and it was like all right, let's do this. Like twice when I was making the Sun. Not because I'm getting paid a lot. I was just so grossly underpaid at the Sun newspaper salary. So I was like, and I talked to my parents later, like, you made the right call. But I went from having, the union and feeling like there was some security, even with all the layoffs, to going to a place I had a 1-year contract with an option. If they don't pick up that option, they're not happy. I'm one and done. So it was scary. But then the news, this is another long story. I'm sorry. The news.
So you're fine. Please go ahead.
I was going to wait to tell my bosses. I just put in I submitted my papers. I didn't want to tell them I had another job lined up because they may not give me the buyout then. So they were like, "Oh, you have something at MASN?" And I was like, "No, I'm just, at this point, I'm just looking to." And I hadn't signed anything yet anyway. But I'm just looking around, spend more time with my daughter, single dad, whatever. And I just happened to mention it to Dave Tremblay before a game. Said, "Hey, when you get back from your trip, I'm probably going to be at MASN instead of the Baltimore Sun. Just give me a heads up between us." He was not a fan of MASN at that time for whatever reason. So that was the Sunday where they finally won a Sunday game for the first time in forever. And he walked into the interview room with a cigar, whatever. And at one point he goes, "And Roch, sorry to hear you're leaving the Sun, but I'm glad you're going to MASN." And I looked at my friend next to me. I said, "I think I just got outed on live TV." Sure enough, the next morning my boss called. "So you do have another?" And I was like, "I have not signed anything." So they let me stay like for the last 2 weeks, but I couldn't write the blog any longer, which was Roch Around the Clock. I got locked out of it, and they launched Peter Schmuck's The Schmuck Stops Here blog, clearly to counter me. I couldn't say where I was going, basically hoping that it would fail terribly. Nobody would follow me. They wouldn't know where I was.
Right.
So I think part of it, me, all of a sudden, it was supposed to just be me. They just wanted me to bring my like humorous little thing I was doing at the Sun over to MASN. And I'm thinking I don't have to do the beat work anymore. This is great. But then it became a competitive thing. Break some stories. You get on MLB trade rumors. Make sure you got your following. I wanted to beat Schmuck. And I just kind of created the monster that now I really wish I had gone back to just writing a few times a week and not having all that pressure. So I think it evolved because I was a little insecure about going somewhere new. I thought it was called MASN.com. I'd never heard of it. It was MASN Sports. I didn't really follow. I didn't even know MASN had a website, really. And competing with the Sun and trying to, shove it up there, what's a little bit here and there. So I think that's what happened. Then it just became a thing where I would just file every day. And then all of a sudden I had some people, tracking it like, "Well, you haven't had a day off yet." And I'd hear from accounting once a year at MASN, like, "Hey, we need you to take some vacation here." And I'm like, "I will, don't worry." And I didn't. Now I think, I'll break news with you guys. That streak's ending in 2023. I'm getting a new contract.
Oh, wow.
But I feel like it's to the point where I need to, for, my mental health and whatever else, to take, to back it down a little bit. I'm still going to cover the team and whatever, but there's a lot of pressure to have something every day, especially when nothing's going on. One of my bosses said, "Roch, we were sure at some point you were going to end the streak. When you wrote on the day your dad died, we realized he's never going to end the streak." So I'm like, all right, which tomorrow is 4-year anniversary of that. So it's probably time. Like I went on my honeymoon. I had stories ready to launch. It's probably time for me to back it off a little bit. But so it really, by accident, it became a streak.
Wow. So you mentioned the pressure. Have you ever had like really bad writer's block, and how did you overcome that? Because you have to put out something. Well, now you do. Well, since the streak started, you've had to put something out every day.
I mean, there are days that are tougher than others, especially the off season. They're like those dead zones where it's like, and that's you try and get a little creative. You do a mailbag, some upcoming storylines. But I did one time have maybe one of the worst hangovers in history on New Year's Day, and the streak was going still. I was at a friend's. I got really sick, and I just spent the night at his house. The next morning, I'm literally scraping my windshield with my forehead resting on it. And he looked out his door and said, "Man, that looks like that sucks." I was so ill. I went back to my house. It was on, I think, a Sunday because NFL games were on. I had the lights off the whole time. And I would sit up in my bed, type a sentence, and have to lay back down because I was so nauseous. It ended up being it was the worst thing I've ever filed. It was like 12 paragraphs on Ryan Adams, who was a second baseman, who was a pretty high draft pick. He had never made it past AAA, I don't think. And it was literally 12 graphs. So what do you think is going to happen to Ryan Adams? And I'd lay back down and try not to puke. So that was probably the toughest one. But there are days where it's like I wake up thinking, well, even tomorrow, I'm going to be thinking, well, until the caravan starts or spring training, unless they do something, and, it's like you got to come up with something. So it is tricky. But somehow it just every off season, I begin thinking I'm not going to be able to get through all these months. And knock on wood, somehow there's something each day that comes up, or I'm able to think of something.
That's very incredible to hear that story. Very, very cool. So, yeah, like I mentioned before, you're with the Orioles. You cover the Orioles for MASN. You're at the ballpark almost every day. So, just me and Dan just walking up to the around the press box. I'm like, hey, I know that guy, and Dan's like, hey,
I believe I pointed him out.
No, yeah, but that one Craig Heist. I was like, Craig Heist is right there. Yeah, I know Craig, but you're like, that's Roch. I'm like, is that Roch?
It's like, that's Roch.
Yeah, he gives me visual confirmation. I'm like, hey, that's Roch. Let's see what we can do. And here he is.
So my seat moved. That probably helped because I had moved when I went to MASN. I moved to the second row, closer to Heist actually. And then during the pandemic, when the press box is practically empty, they said, hey, do you want to just move down to the front again? And I did. And then when they started having access again, like, do you want to just stay there? And I was like, other than having to be careful about line drive foul balls, yeah, why not? So I actually moved back to the front row. Once I went to MASN, I was in the second row. It might have been harder for you to spot me back then. So see, another break. I just happened to, the pandemic brought us together, guys.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes it's meant to be.
It is.
To make a long question short, is there a particular ballpark food that you just cannot go without at Camden Yards?
You know what? I rarely eat the concessions because they have the press dining room, and also, and that's free for me, but also you get reimbursed. But also, a lot of times I'm working on like the pregame notes and everything, so I'm eating at my laptop. It's really pathetic. It's the glamorous part of the job. I'm eating a very mediocre meal at my laptop. So I don't really get around there much. But when they did have, during the pandemic where they had closed press dining, you could bring a sandwich or something, or you could go to the concessions. They actually had a really good taco stand that was right down the ramp from like the home plate area. You hung a right and it was right there. And then I saw, Jimmy's Seafood has got to be awesome, but I think it's way down, and I'm kind of lazy to make that walk if I'm pressed for time. But that's certainly a good one. And you can't go wrong with booze. Fortunately, they serve it sometimes in the press dining room. But if you're willing to make that walk, you never can go wrong with booze.
And the reason why I asked that question is because when me and Dan were at that Orioles game, we decided last minute, let's just go down. Unfortunately, the Pirates did beat Dan's Orioles, but
tough day.
The one highlight I will take, actually two, how beautiful Camden Yards is, because I've been there that was my first time there. And my second takeaway was the hot dog with crab and macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
The absolute best. I spent a pretty penny, but it tasted pretty darn good.
Yeah. 4 out of 5 doctors say you should not do that, but it's so worth it. Now, let me ask you, how have you not been to Camden Yards?
He's a dirty Nationals fan. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Everybody, we're out of time.
No, so I've been thinking about it. Then the pandemic hit, but after I was like, I mean, are we just gonna lock in a trip to Camden? Because I've been wanting to go. I have nothing against the Orioles, and we're gonna get into this next. But I mean, I was like, Dan, let's go. Let's just lock it in. A Sunday 1:35, and we got there, and it was pretty fun. I have to say, a very beautiful ballpark indeed. No complaints. The staff was nice. It's great. I mean, the ushers were nice. Everything. So I really enjoyed my first visit.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes we take it for granted because we're there all the time, and then I kind of see it through the eyes of like visiting media that will go ahead and post photos because we're pretty low. I mean, San Francisco's ballpark, I think you're even a little bit closer. But then there's Camden Yards. So you're right on top of the action, and it's just, it's a great backdrop, and the warehouse, that there was a big debate whether they should tear it down when it was the ballpark was being built. John Stedman, I think, wrote a whole column saying get rid of it. It's an eyesore, and who knew it was going to become this iconic part of the ballpark, and just everything about it. It's beautiful, but I sometimes kind of just do take it for granted, and then I start looking at other ballparks. I'm like, man, we really have it good here. Plus, for our purposes, easy to get in the press lot, a short walk to Home Plate Plaza, the elevator, press bus is easy to get downstairs. So for our work purposes too, it's ideal. You go to Nats Park, no offense, but you're so high up, the game's more of a rumor. Like, I think you're playing down there. I can't tell. You have to park in a garage that they charge you $44, and then you got to write it off. And it's a long walk then, and it's hard to get from there and back to the club, down to the clubhouse quickly because you're so many floors up. It just makes me realize the convenience of Camden Yards, along with just how nice it is.
Absolutely. So let's get into some Orioles baseball talk. Unfortunately, not making it to the postseason, but give credit where credit's due. They made some pretty big strides this year, Roch. I haven't followed them as closely as I would have liked because I usually follow both the teams in the DMV, but I'm sure Dan can pick up some more pieces. But I know one name for sure who came up through the minors, Adley Rutschman. He did absolutely fantastic. Just a lot of, I would say the energy is shifting, and this Orioles baseball team is getting better and better and better. And it's just going to take a little bit more time until we see this team back in the postseason.
I agree. And they came much closer than we imagined. I didn't see one projection that had them finishing above 500, let alone they weren't eliminated till like 5 days left in the season. And the bullpen is really where that started. It was so much better than what it had been. Brandon Hyde could rest easy when he picked up that phone. He was getting key outs from guys. And you have to hope there isn't a regression because, sometimes you have guys that kind of peak like that, and then the following year they take a step back. But they're going to get a full year of Rutschman, a full year of Gunnar Henderson, probably a full year, we assume, of Kyle Stowers, Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall. They're going to have some other guys coming up to go with the Santander's, Mullins, Hayes, Mountcastle, whatever. And so you would think that they're going to continue to trend in that right direction. It's just, is the rotation going to be good enough? Because they didn't go out and get the big number one starter. And they're hoping that turns out to be homegrown, like Grayson Rodriguez, for example. And you hope you get full seasons from Kramer and Bradish and Wells instead of spurts of being really good. So, yes, they have an opportunity to take that next step, even though it's such a hard division. Maybe you're playing for a wild card, but you would take that. But, yeah, it was a big surprise. And really, Rutschman was the key. If you look what the record was when he came up May 21st, and what they were the rest of the way, that's not a coincidence. And, they had to make a choice. There were people in the organization that were pushing hard for Bobby Witt Jr. And obviously there were others that said, no, Rutschman's got to be the guy. You probably couldn't go wrong either way. But Rutschman, it was just, he's just such a difference maker all around, behind the plate, at the plate, the way he works with the pitchers and his energy. He did bring, there was that youthful energy when these guys were coming up, and you could see that difference. And now we hope that brings more people to the ballpark. It's really fun. I mean, I covered this team full time since 97, and it was electric there. When you have 40-some thousand people at Camden Yards, we always remember, the postseason and the Delman double, the famous Delman double.
My favorite.
It's never been louder there. And I think they get back to that. It's just between the losing seasons, which you knew were coming, it was going to be ugly, and the pandemic. Baltimore's obviously, its reputation hasn't been great. Some people still worry about, is it safe? And believe me, it's safe to go to the ballpark, but still, Baltimore's, their reputation has taken a real hit. So trying to get tourists coming back, people that are planning their vacations. Now people that do that are like Red Sox and Yankee fans, that tickets are cheaper to come to Camden Yards.
Exactly.
But you get more people to come, and they're working on that, the concerts and things like that. But you get those people back to the ballpark, that's a big home field advantage.
So would you say that this core and this farm system in general, is this the most promising group you've covered in your time here? You said full-time since 97. Obviously, back then the Orioles were, annual playoff contenders. They've had a couple spurts, in the last, 10 to 15 years where they've been in the postseason. But, do you see long-term playoff success because of the young core and the farm system and the fact that they have, that Mike Elias has really been responsible for rebuilding that and reshaping that, which is really the foundational thing for, a small market team, the team that's not the Yankees or the Red Sox that can go out and just spend, boatloads of money. So,
right. I mean, I think they certainly can get to the point where they're annual contenders like the Rays are, and the Rays aren't outspending everybody, but the Rays do spend some. And I think with the Orioles, Mike Elias has come through with everything he's promised up to this point, as far as what they've done with the international market, that department, and suddenly becoming involved internationally, which they weren't before, and their analytics department that he built, and the talent pipeline. I've covered this team when they rank last in the majors or farm system, and now they're number one. I mean, that's a tremendous jump. And he was talking about just keep pumping that talent in. That's what they're doing. The guys they have that made the majors, the guys who are on the verge of it, like Colton Cowser and Connor Norby, for example, Joey Ortiz. And then you go further back from that. Here's Jackson Holiday, and there's going to be other guys in whoever's the next round here. And that's what you're looking to do. Plus these international players who are slowly, 16 or whatever, it's going to filter through. But they are going to have to reach a point, and they've said they will do this, where they will start then when it's time to increase payroll and spend more. Now, we got some confusion with liftoff, thinking that didn't just mean now we're at the point where we can contend every year and add to the major league roster, not just get prospects, but also that meant liftoff for the payroll. Those were two different topics, as we later learned when Michael Elias clarified that the payroll is going to go up. They've raised it to 6 guys already through arbitration, or 5, and there's going to be a 6th with Austin Voth, plus guys they have added. But it's a gradual increase. They're not going to suddenly go out and spend $300 million on a player. That's why all the rumors about Carlos Rodon, or was there Correa or anybody else like that, where it was never going to happen. They weren't going to spend that much. I think some fans thought liftoff meant, yes, we're going to spend millions and millions on, they're not there yet. And I don't know if they ever will be to that point. I think they get to the point maybe after this off season where they're willing to go after more of some of the first tier guys instead of second and third. So I think if you do that, coupled with the talent they already have coming up through the system and the surplus they have where they could go ahead and make some trades, which they've wanted to do since like Andy McPhail, we used to talk about that. Grow the arms, get the surplus, then trade some like the Astros did when Elias was bringing the top line starters and other teams do it. So these guys can help you on the team, or they can be sent to somebody else. And they may have to rely on that as well. Make sure you trade the right guys, though. But still, I think at some point the payroll, they're going to have to go ahead and spend a little more to fill some spots. But I think they're in a really good position as far as prospects they have now, being able to rely on those in-house guys and to be a better baseball team.
Well, that makes me so excited as a long-suffering, not long-suffering, but, I was born in 97, so I've never really had a chance to see a consistent Orioles team. Had a couple of great moments.
So you were born the year that I was full-time covering the Orioles for 97. The first time. Okay, just put in perspective. The wire-to-wire season, you were born.
That's it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So just to wrap things up here, Roch, I know pitchers and catchers report mid-February. I'm sure you're sort of prepping stuff to cover, get ready to go full steam ahead, writing for however many days during the week you will write, because I know you said you're cutting it back a little bit, but what are you expecting to see out of pitchers and catchers once they report? And just this can be general, because I know this is sort of a loaded question and it's still pretty early, but what are you looking to see out of spring training from the Orioles as well?
Yeah, they report on the 15th. The first workout's the 16th. First full squad, I think, is the 21st. So, you see, make sure everybody showed up, no visa issues, everybody, no unexpected injuries. We know Nick Vespi had hernia surgery. They were nice enough to tell us that, or we would have wondered what was wrong with Nick Vespi. But you're going to look at, John Means, how's he progressing, from his return from Tommy John. Now we're going to get to talk to him at this caravan that's coming up. It's going to be another opportunity. And, we're going to get closer looking like a Kyle Gibson. I've never covered him. he was signed to be like a fourth or fifth starter, probably. He may end up being the number one starter opening day if they don't add somebody else. We don't know. It's such a wide open competition. I think that's probably going to be the most interesting component of this camp is who are the 5 starters and what order are they going to be in. Usually you go to camp and you already know, all right, well, John Means was definitely 1. And last year it was like in Jordan Lyles is 2. How did the last 3 play out? Other years it was always Chris Tillman was the number 1 guy, and let's see how they slot after that. Right. This is a rare occasion when we're going to show up, and if they don't add somebody else to the rotation, and certainly if they don't add a number 1, and you probably have to make a trade to get a true number 1 now, then we're going to be like, how are they going to line these guys up? Maybe going into opening day in Boston is going to determine who has the best camps. It's like a steel cage match. I mean, this is a wide open competition for 5 spots and in what order they're in. So to me, that's the most interesting thing. And then how the bullpen is comprised. Some of it could be which guys who didn't make the rotation end up in long relief or in relief at all. Is DL Hall one of those guys? Is it Austin Voth, who can be like a swing man? Bruce Zimmerman, Spencer Watkins, whomever. How many of those guys could filter down to a bullpen that's already pretty loaded right now? So I think we already know the catching competition. The backup is McCann. We know Rutschman. There's no drama on the catcher side of pitchers and catchers. But pitching, that's the most interesting thing. It's rotation, bullpen, and then maybe the final bench spot is what we're going to be looking for.
And that is key for a young team. You gotta have arms. You gotta have pitching. So
you never have enough starting pitching. Always remember that. If you have 8 or 9, they're going to say we need 12 because there are always injuries or AAA depth.
And in the going to the bullpen just briefly, that entrance music from Bautista, that is very, very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. And at first I thought maybe that was putting too much pressure on him because when there's a light show, the video montage and the music and the Omar was, the team in the other dugout is like, we want to jam it right now with these guys. Like we want to make them pay for this. Like, how dare you, So I thought, man, you're really like poking the bear when you do that. So you better really have a lot of confidence in your guy. I think he handled it really well. And fans really enjoyed it. But you get a light show break it out. It's pretty cool. But it probably tightens the pressure a little bit on Felix because now you've really incited the other team that probably doesn't appreciate the theatrics, even though you do see it in other ballparks as well. But I think it was a cool idea. They pretty much had just put together that video, and then all of a sudden it went perfectly. They had the whistle, and he had one of the things that you were totally unexpected. A guy who averaged like 5+ walks per 9 innings in the minors, reduced them in the majors. It never happens that way. Sanel Perez was another guy. Too many walks in the minors. Usually it's worse in the majors, and he reduced his. It says a lot about the Orioles pitching program that they have. But now you have to hope that there's no regression, and these guys can go ahead and duplicate that. And Brian Baker can be the same guy. I mean, so you're counting on a lot, which is why it was smart to bring Michael Gibbons back, because that's a 60 to 70 appearance strikeout guy who strengthens that bridge to the closer and who can close a little bit himself if he has to.
The School of Roch. You can find him on MASNsports.com. He has a lot of great Orioles covering anything and everything. The Baltimore Orioles. You can find him on Twitter at MASNRoch. Roch, I wish we had more time, but I know we have to let you go. But this was a blast, my friend, and it was a great pleasure interviewing you today, my friend. And if we didn't hear from you beforehand, we wish you safe and happy season covering the Baltimore Orioles.
Thanks. Well, you'll hear from me. First of all, we'll do this again sometime. And unless something changes, I get a couple club level tickets to each game. So pick a game, stay in touch. I'll give you my tickets. You can experience life on the club level. And of course, if the game's dull, you can always go back to the whole bar area and all that. But and you can sample all the new food. So let me know which game you want to go to.
Dude,
get you out of Nats Park there, Josh. We got to get you out of Nats Park.
Yeah, we gotta make sure he goes to the real.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the Orioles and the Nats too. But before we close things out, I mean the Nats, they're young. This is their youth. We're seeing their youth. I'm not expecting much, so I'm not sure how much you read down there, Roch, about the Nats, but they're young.
Right. Sure. and they're not spending the money they were before. But you know what? You can ride that World Series a little longer if you're them. It's been since '83 with the Orioles. You can't ride that anymore. You know?
That's right. You're totally right.
Matt and Roch right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Thanks again, Roch. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy it.
Is it finally time to upgrade your home's interior? How about with an authentic farm table made locally from recycled barnwood? Shenandoah Primitives, based right here in Winchester, Virginia, makes farm tables, benches, tables, coffee tables, and a long list of other items for your home decorating needs. At Shenandoah Primitives, function and style are combined for great furniture that will last generations. If you're interested in combining the industrial look of metal with wood, or considering something incredibly unique with a live edge, Shenandoah Primitives turns those ideas into reality. Thinking about a mirror, wine rack, or other accent piece for your home, Shenandoah Primitives can assist with that as well. As a local small business, Shenandoah Primitives is happy to work with each client for a custom design or schedule an appointment to come out and view current inventory. Local, high-quality, handmade items can be found at Shenandoah Primitives. Find us on Facebook and Instagram or visit us at www.shenandoahprimitives.com. Once again, that's www.shenandoahprimitives.com.
Hey, sports fans. Thank you for listening to and supporting the Kirby on Sports podcast with founder and host Josh Kirby, along with lead contributor Dan Dembski. Like, subscribe, and give them a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast from. My name is Dr. Dave Miles, founder of Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation. Our company helps leaders build engaged and productive teams. Exclusively for listeners of the Kirby on Sports podcast, you can take an opportunity to discover your primary communication style and learn more about effective communication with others. Text Kirby to 757-903-0743 for your free copy of the Working From Home Communication Assessment, where you'll learn your primary communication style, how to better communicate with others not like you, and tips on working remotely based on your personal communication style. 10 minutes, tons of resources. Learn about yourself and your team. Again, text Kirby to 757-903-0743 for your free assessment report today. I'm Dr. Dave Miles, founder of Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, where we help you and your team be more engaged and productive by understanding each other better. Back to you, Josh.
All right, continuing here on the Kirby on Sports podcast, we have a lot of baseball to talk about, getting you set for the start of the Major League Baseball season, 162 games of America's pastime, which I'm looking forward to. We are now joined by content producer and prospect writer for Baseball America. She also handles most of the Nationals, Washington Nationals, in terms of their content for Baseball America and their prospects as well, discussing a lot of the youth within the Nationals organization and maybe around some other teams in the league. One, Savannah McCann. Savannah, thanks so much for a little bit of time today here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. How's everything going?
Things are great. Thank you for letting me come on and talk about prospects. Everyone else is tired of hearing about it, so I'm always excited to have a platform to talk about them.
Oh, yeah, it's so great connecting with you. Your work's amazing. I'm sure Baseball America takes a lot of time because, I mean, I'm not really... I know how big prospects are in terms of baseball, but actually being in the middle, studying it, writing a handbook on it, I would feel that's very, very intense because the prospects, you would have to do a lot more digging in my mind than just people that are already being called up to the major leagues.
Absolutely. The guys in the majors have already proven themselves. You know that if they're in a slump, you can almost guarantee they're going to come out of their slump. But if a minor leaguer goes into a slump, you have to start thinking, is this a trend? Are they injured? Is this something that we have to watch out for? Is this a pattern that they've had in the past? And there's so many more things that go into it and you start speaking scout language of, you go back to when they were 16 years old and they did this, and oh, does this connect? Does this connect? And I found myself down like rabbit holes of these 18-year-old prospects trying to predict what they're going to be like in 10 years.
That's awesome. So Savannah, just briefly start, I usually ask all my guests this: what led you into sports, your love of sports, into Baseball America today?
So baseball kind of found me, actually. I was working as an intern with NBC Sports Washington. I went to school at American University, and I loved sports. I've always been a sports fan, but I wasn't necessarily a baseball fan. I grew up in Pittsburgh. The Pirates were not good. So I wasn't, super attracted to covering baseball. I wanted to cover football. I'd cover hockey. I'd do anything. And the opportunity presented itself in the 2019 season when I had graduated college and moved in full-time with NBC Sports Washington. And they said, we need someone to cover the Nationals. We have our beat writer. You'd shadow him. How do you feel about baseball? And I just was so hungry to do something. And I've always been told, say yes to everything. So it's like, oh, okay, I'll try baseball. Like, I can't guarantee I'm going to love it. They're like, try it. I promise. So, as everyone's heard, they start the season pretty poorly, and then they win the World Series that year. So I got very lucky with the first season that I covered. And after that, my mind was complete. I was like, how does everybody not love baseball? This is the greatest sport in the entire world. It's amazing. Everyone's like, yeah, that's what we've been trying to tell you. I'm like, okay, how do I work in baseball? And that's kind of how I was like, I will do anything it takes to get into baseball full time. So I did a ton of research on my own, realizing baseball is much more of a numbers game than I anticipated. Did a ton of research, learned from a bunch of people, and then luckily I got my shot with MLB.com as a reporter. Covered the Nationals and the Orioles, and actually I got to cover all 30 teams for an entire season. As teams would come into town, I would hop on the beat for a weekend, and then as the series left, I would hop off and move to a different one. And then I got my start with Baseball America covering prospects, and as we just said, it's an entirely different beast. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I've learned more in the last year of Baseball America than I think most people had in like an entire lifetime of studying prospects.
Yeah, I gotta say, Savannah, just going off on a bunny trail really quick. When I get these guests, I try to do some research and everything. And I saw your Twitter account, and I was just scrolling through, and I see a picture of you in this monster setup reporting traffic. And this has nothing to do with sports, but I used to be a huge traffic junkie, like listening to those reports all the time. And that monster setup you had, it's like, I saw that. I'm like, hey, from traffic to sports, you can't beat that.
Oh my gosh, that was during 2020 when sports weren't happening. And I was trying to come up with a way to better myself. And I was like, I know I want to cover baseball full time, but if it's not going on, what else can I do? And WBAL in Baltimore offered a traffic position to me, and it was on air. So I got to practice, and I'll never forget. They told me, think of it as like play-by-play, but for traffic. And I was like, sure. Okay. So I said yes to that opportunity, and it ended up leading me to MLB, and it led me now. I'm on 106.7 The Fan doing sports updates. So it was great practice, but I never once in my life thought I'd be a traffic reporter.
So getting back on topic here, in terms of NBC Sports Washington and MLB.com for the beat covering all 30 teams at one point in time, what's sort of the difference between that and Baseball America now? Because I'm sure there are a lot of differences in terms of what you're doing in terms of coverage, because you're focused more on the youth of baseball.
Absolutely. So with NBC Sports Washington, we covered all the DC teams. So I still felt like I was kind of bouncing around a little bit, but it was more localized. And then with MLB.com, I was bouncing around a ton. So, one weekend I'm covering the Orioles, the next weekend I'm covering the Dodgers, and then I'm over to the A's. And you never knew what you were going to get. With Baseball America, I kind of have the privilege that I can focus in on the Nationals farm system and learn as much as I can and get as many contacts as I can. And I still get to cover top 100 prospects, and I'll still help out with all of our prospect coverage. But being able to dive headfirst into a system has been so nice, and I've gained a ton of experience. And I now could rattle off, oh, you want to know the catching prospects? Let me give you the next 10 catching prospects that you might need to know in the Nats system. And that's something is exciting to me, and I didn't think it ever would be.
That sounds very, very interesting, very, very unique. Obviously, just a couple weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. It, I mean, the prospects again from pitchers and catchers. That standpoint. Let's just start off with the Nationals. I mean, the Nationals, a rough time, a rough season last year. In my mind, they're just experimenting with the youth of this team since they had the World Series run, and basically everybody from that World Series team is pretty much gone, I believe. But starting with pitchers and catchers, what have you seen so far as we get set for pitchers and catchers reporting?
That's the really fun time about spring training, is that you kind of get your first looks at the young guys. And with the Nationals, when they have so many young players, everyone just wants to prove themselves and everyone wants to go out there and show what they can do. So I have a feeling this spring training is going to be a really fun time of watching a really young core come together and play together for one of the first times, especially the starting rotation. You're going to have Mackenzie Gore, Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli. Those names we've heard about Cade Cavalli for years and years. And I do expect him to, if all goes well, make the starting rotation out of camp. So watching him kind of settle into this role of, I don't need to prove myself. I just need to continue to be the prospect I know I am, and I'll earn that starting job.
So, and just looking ahead to the rest of the team outside of the pitchers and catchers, a lot of young talent coming out of the Fredericksburg Nationals team. James Wood, I've seen some of his highlights. He looks pretty good. Can you touch on him, some of those other prospects, and what you think could happen if some of these guys get a chance to be called up this year in your mind?
So James Wood is a player unlike anyone I've ever seen. He has incredible power, and he's just a good all-around player. I mean, he's like 6'7", 240 pounds. He's a huge outfielder, but he still is quick. He still is able to hit for power. He's able to hit to all parts of the field. I mean, he has the ability to move up in the national system fairly quickly. I don't expect we're not going to see him next year. We might not even see him the year after. I think that's when that young core will really move up. But someone you might be able to see in Washington this year is Robert Hassel. He's the number 2 player in the national system, according to Baseball America. And he's a player that probably has the highest floor of any prospect. So he's a consistent, all-around good player. I really expect that he would be a September call-up. So you might not see him right away, but he's going to make an impact in Washington. He's going to be a perfect everyday player to kind of slot right into the outfield. And I expect that if you don't see him this year, he'd be in the starting next year.
Could you see any other prospects in terms of pitchers, catchers, or the rest of the squad in the minors? Could you expect to see anybody else called up based on your research, your analysis for Baseball America, or maybe some player that is just a surprise call-up, something like that? Have you ever seen that?
Absolutely. And I know that Washington has been looking at their pitchers and who can we add to the bullpen? Who can we add that's going to make an impact right away? And I think Zach Bresky is somebody who I think he ranks right around like 14, 15 in the national system. I'm trying to pull up my little list here, find out exactly where. He's in like the 20s, excuse me. But he's somebody I think that will move up into Washington's bullpen and make an immediate impact. He has the ability to do so, and he's been mainly a reliever for a while now, so I don't see – they wouldn't keep trying him to put him in a starting rotation. I think that's where he slots in the best, and he's somebody that will go to Washington and really add to the bullpen, which has been a struggle. So I think he's somebody, as well as there's a catcher, Israel Pineda. He has a ton of power. He will probably move over to first base, a designated hitter type of guy, but I don't think it's crazy to think that he could be called up sooner rather than later, though he is very young.
What do you think of this national squad? Obviously young, but opening day. I know it's still a long time away, but how do you think this squad is going to look? I mean, yeah, I know that's a loaded question, but I mean, in terms of, do you think they're ready to take this next step it's the youth of the team, the youth of the Nationals. What do you think come opening day, who their starting crew is going to be in terms of that? And what do you expect out of opening day, to make a long question short?
Well, the good news is that the young core is starting to take over in Washington. I said, Josiah Gray, Mackenzie Gore, Katie Cavalli, that they're going to be set and that's your starting three in the starting rotation. You have Luis Garcia. You have Keibert Ruiz. You have young guys that are going to be staples in this franchise for years to come. You don't have all the missing pieces yet. I think they're still going to be in the minors for a couple years, but you can start seeing them be familiar with each other. CJ Abrams is going to be your shortstop. And then at third base, I don't think Carter Kieboom is going to win the job out of spring training. I think there's going to be somebody else there. But I think the rest of the young squad is going to start taking shape. However, and I want to say this, if I want the Nationals to be good, it's better to watch good baseball. And last year, the Nats just played bad baseball. They were making errors that they shouldn't have made. It was sloppy work. I do think that improves this season, and I don't think it's going to be as miserable as it was last year. But by no means is this team turned around this season and we're going to start seeing some winning. I think that might be next season, for sure the season after.
So do you still see bottom of the barrel? Do you see them improving, maybe second to last in the division, something like that? Because at this point, I'm sure that the playoffs are out of the question because of what happened last season.
I think the problem is that the rest of the division is so good and they've spent a ton of money to be good. So you're already competing within your own division, basically against everyone except the Marlins. So when you're looking around, it kind of makes things really difficult to gauge how good you can be when you're playing these teams that, just went out and signed the Cy Young winner. Okay, well, that's going to make it really hard every time we face the Mets. We're going to face Justin Verlander. Okay, we're not going to do so great that game. So there's a ton of talent in the division, but I don't think it's going to be, 100-loss season. We might come close, but I don't think it's going to be a 100-loss season.
Yeah, I think that's the next step, just making sure you don't lose 100 games because, 100 games in the loss column is, it just looks bad. But if you have double digits, it doesn't look as bad. Just wrapping things up, just a few more questions, just general throughout the entire league. I know you're primarily focused on the Nationals, but going up I-95 to Baltimore, the prospects show that Baltimore could have a really good season this year.
The Orioles are definitely a team to watch. They exceeded expectations last season, and now I might be wrong on this, but they have 8 prospects in Baseball America's top 100, and I believe 7 of them are in AAA or have reached the AAA level. So that's help on the way this season. That's, you're starting next season. So the Orioles are going to be really good, and they just have so much talent. You keep hearing about Gunnar Henderson, Grayson Rodriguez, these guys that are in the top of not only Baltimore system, but in all of baseball are primed and ready to go and start in Baltimore.
And prospects around the rest of the league, has anybody caught your eye just in general? And I don't need a full description or anything, but just anybody you've seen from the rest of the league who could make an impact from down in the farm system getting their call up this season?
This season, I know that our top 2 prospects in baseball, Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll, if they don't start the season on the starting opening day roster, which I expect they will, those 2 guys are going to make immediate impact in Baltimore and in Arizona. So those 2 guys are kind of gimmies. Jackson Churio is a guy that last season jumped onto our top 100 and has now moved all the way up to number 3. And he's young. I believe he's 18 years old in AA. But if you're moving at that pace already, what's to say that you're not making a debut for the Brewers already? And then one other guy that he's not on our top 100 yet, but Bubba Chandler with the Pirates, he's a right-handed pitcher. The Pirates need help. And he has an above average fastball, slider, changeup. If you're pitching that well, the Pirates need help. I think he's going to be a huge name to watch this year.
So once again, Savannah McCann, Baseball America. Savannah, I got to ask, roughly how long does it take to compile the top 100 prospects?
Oh my gosh, we put together our prospect handbook in like December 15th of every year is when everything has to be done. And December 16th, we're starting for the next year. So it takes like a full year to put together all the top 50 prospects in the Nats organization. And then you're re-ranking them 100 times until you get to the Nats top 30. Then the Nats, top 10. And then you're looking at the top 100. So it takes forever. And we never get it right. That's the fun part about it. Or the crazy part is we can try as much as we want, but we're always going to miss somebody that, slipped through the cracks, or we're always going to be wrong about somebody that was projected to be perfect. And that's half the fun of this is, how much can we get right? And you don't know for another 5 years.
Really quickly, obviously we saw the Phillies and the Astros last year in the World Series, the Phillies making a remarkable run with an interim manager. I know this is another loaded question, but just in terms of the MLB, not really prospects, what are your biggest thoughts about this season? Who do you like this year? I mean, I know it's a stretch to say who's going to be in the World Series, but what are you looking out for?
Honestly, it's the same players as it was last season. The Dodgers are going to be good. The Astros are going to be good. The Phillies are going to be good. The Braves are going to be contenders. The Mets are going to be contenders. So I don't think it's crazy to say that we could see a repeat World Series matchup because those two teams are going to be heavily favored again. And they added so much talent that they got better. And I don't know how that's possible. The best got better.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very interesting season. Once again, Savannah McCann from Baseball America. Before we let you go, Savannah, tell us anything about any new work coming up Baseball America wise and where the listeners can find you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, all social media platforms at SavJay, SAVJAYE. It's my first name and my middle name. And that's where I post all of my work. I've really been working on the Nats and the top of the system. I'm headed down to spring training. So I'm going to have so many videos and interviews and all kinds of behind the scenes scoop. You'll get day in the life videos. You'll get inside access to everything I've been doing with Baseball America. And spring training is the best time because that's when you get the most one-on-one time with people. So expect a ton of coverage there.
Savannah, as always, doing great work for Baseball America. I really appreciate the time you've given us today, and hopefully we can chop it up again really soon.
Can't wait.
Hey, Kirby on Sports Podcast listeners, Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate here. It may seem scary or daunting at first to think about buying or selling a home. Well, look no further. Give me a call. 540-247-1527. There's nothing more than I love to do than help my friends make those transactions fun, interesting, and at the end of the day, productive. Look me up online, iconsales.com, and even better, find me on my podcast, Iconic Talk, with my co-host Megan Eanes on any podcast platform. We will share all the local news about real estate markets and our local community. It's educational. Look us up. We'd love to help you. Iconsales.com, 540-247-1527. Josh, back to you.
Bed bugs. The only thing creepier than thinking about them is actually having them. Trust me, you don't want to have them. Locally owned and operated Barrett Pest and Termite Services can keep you from having bed bug nightmares and infestations. Call 540-340-3922 to schedule your free inspection and consultation. If bed bugs are already in your home, we'll get rid of them so you can rest easy. We also specialize in keeping homes and businesses free of other pests, including rodents and termites. That's Barrett Pest and Termite Services, 540-340-3922.
Hey, it's Josh here for my friends over at Shenandoah Music, here to remind you that Shenandoah Music is your local music superstore. They carry guitars, drums, basses, keyboards, wind instruments, PA gear, recording equipment, and more. Not only do they have the best selection, but they will have the best prices, and better still, the knowledge to make sure you're getting the gear you need. And with the Shenandoah Music credit card, you buy now and pay it off over the next year. So when you think music, think Shenandoah Music in Winchester across from B-Dubs. Again, a big thanks to Savannah McCann in MASN Rock, the School of Rock, as baseball is right around the corner. Opening day just a couple weeks away, and we will have more baseball coverage throughout the course of this season right here on the Kirby on Sports podcast. But that about wraps it up for this episode of the Kirby on Sports podcast. Again, a big thanks to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate, Barrett Pest and Termite Services, Shenandoah Music, and Mark Lynch with Guild Mortgage. And don't forget, Don't Sleep Energy, the official energy drink of the Kirby on Sports podcast. Check out their Amazon store at amazon.com/shops/don't sleep. And you can use promo code Kirby123 for 10% off your order every single time. Make sure you check out the Kirby on Sports podcast on all social media platforms and all streaming platforms, and www.kirbyonsports.com. Until the next time you hear us or see us, always remember to create greatness, and we say so long and peace out.